From the possibility of Monday being the last day for Instagram and Facebook to the war of statements between the government and Twitter, this week escalated pretty fast. Hello and welcome to this episode of Tech This Week, where we bring you up to speed with the week's key developments in startups and technology space. The big story this week centers around the new intermediary guidelines, which came into effect on May 26, which affects all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp included, video platforms and OTTs like Netflix, Amazon Prime and Disney Hotstar, as well as digital media companies. Joining us to talk about the implications of the rules and the compliance by these companies are Kazim Rizvi, founder at the policy think tank The Dialogue, and partner at IndusLaw, Avimukt Dar. The news fresh off the press right now is that Tata Digital, a subsidiary of Tata Sons, has acquired a majority stake in online grocery retailer BigBasket and its business-to-business operations. The company had filed for approval by the Competition Commission of India to acquire up to 64.3% stake in BigBasket earlier this year through primary and secondary transactions. While the details of the deal were not disclosed by Tata, reports peg the first tranche of the deal at $2 billion. Now, going back to the social media platforms, Indian language-focused microblogging platform Who raised $30 million from Tiger Global Management this week. This is Tiger Global's second bet in Indian language platforms in 2021 after ShareChat, which turned a unicorn in a Tiger Global-led round earlier this year. Talking about unicorns, this week birthed another. Banking technology platform Zeta raised $250 million from SoftBank's Vision Fund 2 at a valuation of $1.45 billion. The company, which was spun off from DirectEye and is co-founded by Bhavan Turakia and Ramki Gadipati, is another contender with a neobank offering in the Unicorn Club, apart from Razorpay. And it is not just startups. Listed entity INFIBEAM also announced officially the launch of its neobanking platform, GRIT or GRIT, through its payments arm. The platform saw another major funding announcement as logistics SaaS player FAREYE announced its Series E investment from Technology Crossover Ventures or TCV and DRAGONEER Investment Group. When we are talking money, Indian blockchain scalability platform POLYGON raised an undisclosed amount from Mark Cuban, who is also the owner of NBA's Dallas Mavericks and investor in the reality show Shark Tank. It joins the 100-strong Cuban portfolio. Cuban told CoinDesk that he plans on integrating Polygon crypto into portfolio company Lazy.com, which allows an easy way to display NFT or non-fungible tokens. This brings us to big tech. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella hinted at the launch of the next generation of Windows at the Microsoft Build 2021 event. Apart from this, he promised new features on Microsoft's collaborative platform Teams and made some key announcements for developers, including a preview of the Project Reunion app, which makes it easier for Windows app developers to use APIs across UWP and Win32 platforms. Google's cloud computing arm this week announced 3 new solutions for its database and data analytics portfolio. These include verticals called Dataplex, Analytics Hub, and DataStream. Separately, in a press conference, Google CEO Sundar Pichai said that it was still early days for India's new intermediary rules and that the search engine giant and its video platform YouTube will comply with the law of the land, which brings us to the big story of the week. In February, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology made public the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code, Rules 2021. The rules ask significant social media platforms, which have over 50 lakh users, to appoint a chief compliance officer, a nodal officer, and a grievance officer, all stationed in India. Further, the new rules say that the chief compliance officer will be held criminally liable for content posted on the platform. Separately, on Monday, the special cell of Delhi Police went to the New Delhi office of Twitter India to serve a notice regarding a tweet by BJP spokesperson that the platform had labeled as manipulated media as per its policy guidelines. when Twitter issued a combined statement on the intermediary rules as well as the action of Delhi police, saying that it was concerned about the intimidation tactics used. Both the government and Delhi police got back at Twitter and said that, in separate statements, that Twitter was crossing a line on Thursday. Also, WhatsApp, in a separate development, challenged the new IT rules, saying that giving away the originator of a message as per the rule requirements will require to break the end-to-end encryption on the platform, and that this will compromise the privacy of the individual. The Delhi High Court is yet to hear the petition. All of this ties in together with the social media intermediary rules. With so much unfolding, we have our first guest, Kazim Rizvi of the Delhi-based policy think tank, The Dialogue, to talk more about this. Welcome to the show, Kazim, and thank you for joining us on Tech This Week. Today's discussion was mostly around the new set of intermediary guidelines which came into effect on Wednesday. So had a few questions on that, including, what is the next step for most of these social media platforms now that the rules have come into effect and ministry has actually asked them where they stand on the implementation?
So I think the next steps for the social media platform is to, comply and put all the mechanisms in place which are required in the rules. So that amounts to grievance redressal officers, chief compliance officers, and also, complying with all the mandates which include in the rule from part 1, rule 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the major chunks of the rule. So I think the next step would be to start complying and also to make sure that they put in the right technical processes, the right legal and systematic processes which require them to comply with the new rules. I believe the time frame has been pushed to 15 days. It's what I believe the ministry has issued. So I think they still have some time, but going forward, I think they'll have to start maybe putting all the systems in place to make sure that they are adhering to the rules, and I think that will be a process going forward.
Got it. And Kazim, when we were talking previously, you did mention that some aspects of the rule do need clarification. So are the clarifications in place, or have the companies asked for the clarifications of any specific aspects which you can highlight for us?
I think primarily what the government could also do is provide standard operating procedures. It could issue certain guidelines as clarificatory notes when it comes to defining what constitutes, let's say, a news or a digital media, or what are the definitions of the areas or the aspects mentioned in part 1 of the rules. So I think some sort of clarification could be given, some standard operating procedures on how these compliances would take into effect could be provided from the government's end. I think just to sort of highlight maybe a few areas where further consultation could be done when it comes to origin of tracing of messages, proactive monitoring, verification, and just sort of looking at aspects of the takedown timeline. So the fact is that the rules are required. I think the rules are necessary at this stage. Definitely there is a need to regulate big tech effectively, which the government is also doing. But at the same time, I think, we are looking at the larger internet ecosystem of India, and we need to look at the ecosystem at large and not just from the eyes of a big tech. So, many times, we end up missing the fact that it's actually about user privacy and user security. But at the same time, there are certain aspects around safe harbor, content takedown, personal liability of officers, right? So I think these are some of the areas where further consultation and more nuance could be brought in to make the rules more effective, to do the job of the rules more effective.
Thank you, Kazim, for your time. Also, to understand more about the legal ramifications and how did the ground for the intermediary guidelines come about, especially in the light of the WhatsApp's case against the government, Avimukt Dar of IndusLaw talks to Tech This Week. Welcome to Tech This Week, Avimukt. what kind of action do you think the government can take in case of non-compliance, and is the government intending to act against social media platforms which have not yet complied with the rules? Your take on that?
Yeah, I think just to give a little bit of background to the rules. Now, historically in India, there was a significant gray area on what are the duties and responsibilities of intermediaries in general. Intermediaries, as you know, came about during the dot-com revolution. Suddenly you had what we used to call portals, by which you could access information, by which you could access goods and services. So once those portals started functioning, India faced its first major challenge with the Bazi.com case back in 2004, which is also known as the DPS MMS case, where the Delhi police tried to take criminal action against the portal and its officers in relation to an illegal and obscene clip being circulated on the portal. And at that time, we had no protection for intermediaries whatsoever. That's when the government came out with the intermediary guidelines in the first place to give a certain safe harbor protection as covered under the IT Act in Section 79 to ensure that portals can operate in a safe harbor, and at the same time, they comply with lawful takedown notices and within the law of the land. As you may have seen, last year, the Supreme Court and various high courts were very concerned with the litigious nature of Indian audiences, Indian consumers. We saw this mostly in the area of media. Digital media such as Netflix came under a lot of attack before various high courts, including the Allahabad High Court and the Supreme Court. And the court started feeling that there should be some overarching regulatory framework to govern digital media as well as social media. Otherwise, it is practically a Russian roulette. Depending on what kind of bench you get, what kind of court you get, you will have different outcomes. And so either you create that statutory framework, or you leave it to the Supreme Court to hear it as bunch matters and keep legislating.
Recently, we also saw that WhatsApp challenged the government, saying that, the requirements of the rules, it requires it to break the encryption on the platform, and said that this also goes against the right to privacy. So is it a first, and also, what kind of a example would this set when the petition actually comes up for the hearing?
A lot of the public felt that WhatsApp is completely secure, right? And all the information on WhatsApp is something which nobody knows about. And that was WhatsApp's positioning in its PR as well, right? That it is double encrypted, end-to-end encrypted, as they say. Now, as you know, late last year and early this year, WhatsApp came out with some tweaks to its privacy policy. What WhatsApp was trying to inform its users about is that there is metadata in relation to any WhatsApp account. Like WhatsApp definitely knows our mobile numbers, right? They also may be geo-tagging us based on the kind of permissions we've given to the app. The app may not have the full functionality. Like, for example, if I have to send a location to someone, that location is also derived from WhatsApp through its interface with Google or Apple Maps, as the case may be. And now the government just wants to take it a step further and try to see if their ability to surveil possible terrorists, sex offenders, if that ability to surveil them can be increased. And here we have to just take a step back to just 10 years ago. All your text messages were capable of being surveyed by the government. All of these new mediums of communication is a real lifeline to criminals, to put it bluntly, right? A lot of criminal transactions, terrorist conferences can take place on WhatsApp, which was unimaginable. Which is why you may have seen in the last 2 or 3 years, India has become the leading state actor possibly on internet shutdowns. Because there is no other way in troubled areas or troubled districts to control a law and order situation than to simply switch off the internet, and they get banned for that. That indispensability of multinational social media or digital media is not there. China has demonstrated that. And maybe that has given some amount of leverage to the government when they talk. Like, for instance, the government felt that, rightly or wrongly, that using language like constructive dialogue and conversations, they were offended by that because they said that you are not a foreign power where you talk to the foreign ministry. But if you are a corporate citizen, if you are carrying on business in India, you are subjected to Indian laws and regulations just like everybody else. So that is, of course, posturing. I would say there's a lot of posturing also which goes on these days in the government. And it becomes even more trickier because India and the United States are very close allies. So one other geopolitical aspect is that China and the US are rivals. India and the US are not rivals. And that makes it slightly more difficult for India to take very coercive steps. Like, for example, if you immediately remove platform immunity, that would be a disaster. India would not be able to have conducive relations with the US thereon, right? So Indian government, of course, knows that it has to be careful with the life and liberty of the citizens of the United States in India and also employees of US organizations.
Thank you for the detailed discussion, Avimukt. Really appreciate your time. And with that, I think all eyes will be on the coming few days when the government actually releases the standard operating procedures, which seem to be in the work to implement the social media intermediary guidelines. And we'll also see what unfolds in the WhatsApp's case against the government and the new rules. With that, it is a wrap on this episode of Tech This Week. Stay safe and keep watching.